mandatory life sentence. But as we follow this most tragic chapter of Jennifer's life and remember the lives that were lost, it's hard not to watch and wonder if that is going to be enough. Still with me here, Vera Thomas, Jeff Jacoby, Anthea Butler, and from New Orleans, Barry Scheck. So I actually, thinking about Hudson, I wanted to point out here that when we look at the people who actually end up on death row, the executions are not, it's not that there are more African Americans on death row than there are whites. That's not accurate. It's that those who are on death row are far more likely to be defendants in a time when the victims were white. So we have, when you have a white defendant and a black victim, it's dramatically different than when you have a black defendant and a white victim. So Barry, let me just ask you this question. Is the death penalty applied fairly?
Oh, I don't think the death penalty is applied fairly. This is something that the American Bar Association has been on record pointing out for a long time. And it's just like the case of Reginald Clemens in Missouri. Everything that we know makes the death penalty unfair was going on in that case. We had lawyers that were not adequate to put on a good defense. We had a prosecutor that was running for political office who made admittedly prejudicial comments to the jury that he was admonished for by the judge, not just in this case, but in other cases. The jury itself was stacked in the sense that people who said that they could impose the death penalty, even though they were against the death penalty as a matter of public policy, were thrown off the jury improperly. And there was an interrogation where he was, everybody agrees, certainly injured and had all the earmarks of one of those coerced confession situations that we know has convicted a lot of innocent people. So when you look at a whole record like this, and then there were allegations, there were claims of procedural bars that prevented the judges from hearing all the evidence, you just look at it and say, this is everything that's wrong with capital punishment in America. And it's what led judges who were for capital punishment initially, like Justice Blackmun, to finally say, I can no longer tinker with the machinery of death. We're just not equipped, frankly, to get this right.
So Ms. Thomas, I know that you maintain that your son is innocent. Your son maintains his innocence.
Yes.
So as you listen to Mr. Scheck, is that sense of unfairness, does that resonate for you here?
Oh, definitely. And actually, the things that he's listing there are just tip of the iceberg. There were so many things went wrong in our case from the very beginning to where we are now. It's been like a roller coaster because he stated getting procedure barments. We asked for a mistrial, which I feel we should have gotten, because here we had the judge that gave the prosecutor instructions not to use Manson or Gacy or Reggie had never been locked up before. Prosecutor ignored it, argued it to the jury anyway, and the judge denied his mistrial. However, about a month or two later, we proceeded to move forward with the prosecutor for contempt of court. Here the judge granted the contempt of court with the fine. It just has been so inconsistent.
So Jeff, I mean, we grieve with and for the families of victims, right? But then when I hear Ms. Thomas's story, I wonder, but do we grieve in the same way if there's reason to believe that there are innocent men and women, mostly men, who are actually put to death by the state? Are we willing to also accept the possibility that we are just sometimes wrong?
I think anything human has to face the possibility that it might sometimes be wrong. There are great numbers of people. Barry Scheck has made a whole career, and I admire tremendously what he's done to bring innocent people out of prison. There are great numbers of people who are behind bars, sentenced not to death, but to prison, who turn out to be innocent. Thousands of people have been taken off death row. It's routine. There have been something like 8,500 people who have been sent to death row over the years, but as the numbers you put up before showed, only about 1,300 have been executed. Thousands have come off as convictions have been overturned, as sentences have been overturned, as statutes have been overturned, as a piece of evidence was thrown out. But when you talk about unfairness, don't confuse that with the philosophical or with the moral issue or with the question of whether we're going to have punishment in the first place. If to say that a mistake can be made and an innocent person can be punished is an argument against punishment, then we don't stop with the death penalty. We have to stop with all punishment. And nobody would think of saying that.
Except that the death penalty is irrevocable in a way that other sorts of punishments, we could imagine that there could still be reparation made if you make a mistake in other sorts of punishments.
I certainly understand. We all understand. To be alive and to be dead are two very different things. But tell somebody who's been behind bars for 20 years for a rape he didn't commit that it's revoked now. He's never getting those 20 years back, and there's no amount of reparation that would ever make up for it. But I think it's important also to note, you brought up the question of race. A majority of people on death row are white, not black. A majority of those sentenced to death are white, not black. A majority of those executed are white, not black.
Yes, right.
But a majority of those who murder black murder victims are black. 93% of
yes, right. Well, most murder occurs within race. I promise we're going to come right back on this issue of racial inequality as well as just the cost of this. Stay right there. More right after the break.